Do our nation's institutions have a problem with extremism? There are continuing seriously worrying issues here, and I have been busy preparing a little collection. So the NHS, for example, a former leader of banned terror group Hizb ut-Tahrir, chaired the Islamic terror organisation's meetings whilst working as a GP in Harrow. There was outrage after a Muslim chaplain went off to meet the Taliban, wasn't there? In Manchester, a hospital trust faced allegations that pro-Palestine nurses denied correct care to a 9-year-old Jewish boy. Shall we move on to education now, shall we? The head of the National Education Union, Daniel Kebede, was accused of whipping up violence after he reportedly called for a global intifada at a pro-Palestine rally. In 2022, a primary school teacher who gave money to Islamist terrorists was banned from the classroom. It emerged that she actually believed that violent jihad was the correct interpretation of Islamic teaching, but lied about her actions and beliefs. The civil service now, shall we? The Civil Service Muslim Network was suspended pending an investigation after reports that it had hosted events during which speakers had encouraged officials to lobby colleagues to change the government's policy on the conflict in Gaza. They reportedly told colleagues Israel was evil. The civil servant here from the Department for Work and Pensions was on the stump at a George Galloway rally. He's the head of diversity and inclusion, apparently. Classic. And to cap it all off, on Monday, GBNews revealed leaked messages from staff at the BBC, which appeared to show a Jewish member of staff begging pro-Palestine colleagues to be mindful of the fact that Hamas did actually kill and rape people. What does that imply? Anybody? Has the media, our state broadcaster, now actually been captured too? There are serious questions about whether key institutions in Britain, from our health sector, education sector, civil service and the media, have been infiltrated by some incredibly dodgy characters. Let's get the thoughts of my panel tonight. I am joined by Mark Littlewood, who is the director of the Popular Conservatives. I've also got Adam Brooks, of course, a businessman, activist, boxer, and author and broadcaster Rebecca Reid. Mark, I'll start with you. Everywhere you look around the core institutions, it does appear as though there are elements of them that I would regard as being a bit nefarious.
No, I think that's fair, and you've given a good roll call there of a number of very worrying cases. We need to distinguish between, I think, different types of profession. I'm very worried about police officers, for example, siding with one side over the other. Trade union leaders, well, might disapprove of their politics, but they're not obviously public servants. But I'm not so sure the problem, Patrick, is infiltration or indeed extremism. I think it's tolerance of extremism. If you're a civil servant at a political rally, you need to lose your job like that, straight out the door. And once you do a few of these things, the deterrent effect, pour encourage les autres, as the French say, I think would be pretty high. So when you find it, it needs to be case closed, job gone, career over.
I mean, you don't tend to see stories about this, about members of the rampant far right having infiltrated the NHS, the education system and the civil service.
Let me tell you, if that guy was called Steve and his WhatsApp messages were supporting the far right, then that headline would be all over the media that the far right, you know, is on the rise and we've got a huge problem. This is a problem, and I believe it's because people have been calling for jihad on the streets of London. They've been anti-Semitic, they've threatened Jews, and nothing has happened to them. These people almost feel emboldened by the fact that, you know, that has happened. And, you know, it's MPs, it's teachers, it's uni lecturers, doctors, celebs. How can a doctor, a person that's meant to help you, celebrate Hamas killing people that were at a peace festival, butchering people? Now, just because you work for the NHS does not make you a nice person because of your job. There are evil people in all walks of life.
Reports of NHS staff, Rebecca, walking around with pro-Palestine badges and stickers on their chest. I mean, the former leader of a now banned terrorist organisation was working as a GP in Harrow.
I think if you don't want people to wear any kind of political insignia at work, for instance, in a public organisation like the NHS, that would make sense. But that means no pride badges, no poppies, no anything. And I think that would make perfect sense.
Political?
Yes. And I think
The
it'd be
poppy is
absolutely fine
political.
to say nothing. It's always the poppy. That's the one that everyone always wants a free pass for. We should just say none. No crucifix.
No.
I'm a Christian, no crucifix. No poppy, no pride badge, no nothing.
We wouldn't have an NHS if it wasn't for the heroes that saved this country.
Well,
and
no,
died
we
for
hadn't
this
have an
country.
NHS if it wasn't for Nyra and Bevan, who started it off.
No, we wouldn't have a country. Let's just remember, we would not have a country.
We probably would, but I'm not sure we have time to go into the specific economic motivations of the Second World War. Going back to just institutions, I do agree that it'd be cleaner to get rid of all of it, but realistically, you get a few nutters in every job. I had midwives who told me that all vaccines caused autism. They're idiots. They're not representation of the whole of the NHS. There is a difference between being pro-Palestine and being pro-Hamas. And obviously the latter shouldn't be working, shouldn't be talking.
Here's the problem, isn't it? I mean, on the emblems or the badges or the logos you might wear in, let's say, the NHS, I think the question would be, might that emblem lead to you being partial? Right? So if you're wearing, I don't know, a big conservative rosette, perhaps you're going to be discriminating against Labour politicians or vice versa. If you're wearing some pro-Palestinian thing, it might be considered that you're signalling...
Well, we've seen that.
Right? I'm not quite sure why wearing a poppy would indicate that the treatment you would dispense would be different to different...
Because it means you're being treated by somebody who has an allegiance in a specific way.
Yeah, but it's
and
not,
believes
I can't work out... Hang on,
have...
Rebecca. I can't work out what cohort of patients might be treated differently in virtue of you wearing a poppy. So to my mind, does it show partiality that is inappropriate to your job, right? Now, for politicians, you mentioned that, and quite rightly, there's a lot of MPs who, in my view, have pretty intolerable views, like George Galloway. But kind of fair enough. He's elected to have views. He can express whatever he wants. He's supposed to be partial. But if in the NHS or in the police or in the classroom you are expressing views or displaying imagery which would give the impression that you might be partial amongst the people you're supposed to serve.
But you said that any civil servant who's at any political rally shouldn't be allowed to continue to have their job.
Yeah.
So if you were anti-fox hunting, you should lose your job.
Well, you can't. I mean, you can vote.
If you go to what? If you go to a march?
Well, hang on. Yeah, no, civil servants are allowed to vote, but there used to be. I don't know if they still apply now. You weren't supposed to put political posters in your window, for example. So you're allowed to vote, but as a civil servant, you are not supposed to publicly campaign.
Let's just get to the crux of this. It has become trendy to be anti-Israel, to be anti-Jew.
That's true.
It's
Right?
not trendy.
And it has become trendy in certain sections of
trendy on
Utah.
These are the bits that I live in. It's not trendy.
Like we saw with BLM, it was the trendy thing for youth to jump on. Half of them didn't know what they was jumping on or why they was jumping on it, but they did. It's a trend.
Yeah.
But
anti-Semitism is not a trend, it's a crime.
Look, my point is this, right? If I rattled off all of those different examples that I've had there, and OK, there is a sliding scale on the ones that I've said. You've got from the bloke who cozies up with the Taliban down to someone who is, is pro-George Galloway, right? And there is a difference there. But if that sliding scale was of all the people who were varying different degrees of far right, that would be making headlines. That would be leading the 10 o'clock news.
These are realistically, the majority of people in those industries are more left-leaning. So you are getting that naturally occurring because more people who work in the NHS are left-wing, more activists are left-wing, more journalists are left-wing, more producers.
But isn't that because
those are left-wing jobs. They are inclined to
more support Hamas? Is that what you're saying?
I think we're conflating supporting Hamas and being pro-Israel, being pro-Palestine, and those aren't the same thing.
But Hamas is a terrorist organisation.
Absolutely. No sane person is supporting Hamas.
Again, the issue goes to, are you showing partiality? It might well be the case that, I don't know, a disproportionate number of NHS workers vote Labour compared to the wider population. Fine. But they should not be wearing Labour rosettes.
They shouldn't be wearing anything.
They can vote.
Of
course they can vote. That's the problem, isn't it? Whether your partiality is public. It's not that we're not
you shouldn't be wearing any of them. You shouldn't be wearing a Help the Heroes wristband, and you shouldn't be wearing a crucifix.
Whether it's partiality. If you're wearing a Help the Heroes wristband, does that mean you're not going to treat
I think it's just the ones that you like that you're saying wouldn't inform people's behaviours.
I don't mind if you're wearing, say, the USA flag. I don't think that means you're going to treat Americans more than other cohorts. Are you going to be biased?
You do not need to wear any insignia at work.
A police officer that is meant to protect us, to protect the public, is siding with a terrorist organisation.
Yeah, and in 2023, 1,500
that's an
MPs...
active case, so we'll leave that there, but yeah.
Possibly.
If 1,500 members of the police had an accusation of domestic violence or abuse against them... in 2023, 1,500 in 6 months were accused of that. There are bad people working in every institution.
Yeah, but look at this. But look, you're right. We had massive reports on that. That was leading the news agenda.
There's one story in The Guardian.
The news agenda. There's been loads. I've seen this all the time. Loads and loads and loads of reports about the absolute epidemic of sexual assault taking place against nurses in hospital. Where are all of the reports? Where are the massive reports into our education system where the head of the NEU is calling for a global intifada? If the head of the NEU had come out and been pictured at a rally that was turn the boats back in the Channel now and had said something fruity about Channel migrants, that guy's face would have been plastered all over the BBC.
But we need to make both of those unacceptable, Patrick. That's my point, right? So I agree with you. There is a preponderancy for these to be progressive left, occasionally extremist causes, but generally progressive left causes. It just needs to be stamped out. Okay. It is not OK for a senior civil servant to be seen publicly at a political rally. It is not OK. They can vote for George Galloway, but they can't actively support him in public.
I think it speaks to the attitude of certain organisations that people who work within them think it's OK, presumably, to tell their colleagues that you're just nipping off to Afghanistan to go and meet the Taliban. I think that, to me, implies that there is a certain kind of mindset there where that is acceptable.